just a minute, guys. I want to finish watering this area, which is going to be the topic of today, but I also wanted to show you this. You guys are just invaluable to me with your ideas, and many of you, when I did a watering video, you asked me, or actually recommended to me, that I get a hose link hose reel that retracted on its own. And coincidentally, about that time, Giraffe, which is this brand, asked if they could send me one of their hose reels to try. And oh my gosh, look at this. I've got it pulled out, and then all I do is give it more tension. And it goes right back to where it was. Now, it would go real fast if I wasn't kind of guiding it a little bit, but it works great. It does come with a hose end sprayer, and there were a couple of things that my handyman did when he hung it for me. First of all, we were really mindful of where we hung it and located it on the wall so that it wouldn't be a problem and get caught on things. The other thing was, he did not go directly into the mortar. He made sure, because it's rather heavy, that I think he cut some dowels, some wooden dowels, to use as the plug or whatever that the screws go into inside, so it would be very secure. Obviously, I'm not very technical or very handy. And then I also changed out the hose end sprayer because it was plastic. And I've got a metal one that I think is a little bit better. But oh my gosh, I love it. In fact, I love it so much that I bought one for the front yard. So that is one little tip that I wanted to talk to you about today. But my real topic, I guess, is, what would you say is the hardest thing about gardening? That's my question of the day. What do you think is the most difficult part of gardening? For me, it is practicing patience. It is so hard for me to be patient about really just about everything. Waiting for the bulbs to bloom, waiting for the bulb foliage to fade, waiting for somebody like Stuart to come and help me move a pot, waiting for the seeds to germinate, waiting for a new supply of evergreens to get in, waiting for the hot weather to be over, and to have the patience to and also the frame of mind to just quit being so impatient. There are times that the garden is just going to look really, really messy, and I need to not be impatient and just calm myself and say, no, when I have the time, it will look good again. So that is I guess my little philosophical question for today, which is, what do you think the hardest part of gardening is? And for me, which says a lot about my character flaws, patience is the hardest thing to practice. So Stuart knows that about me. Don't you, Stuart? Well, lest you guys think that you are not garden designers, or you think that you don't have the confidence to design a garden, I want to tell you, au contraire, you are so wrong. Because so many of you did just what a garden designer does, and you intuited, for the most part, what was right and wrong about the entrance into the potager, because I posited the question about whether or not I should use these tall Silverado sage topiaries that I had here in the back corner, or the olive trees. And I was trying out, I do a lot of garden design by trial and error, as you probably do, which is one of the reasons that these lightweight pots, I think, are really valuable for that. So if we go out to the front a little bit, let's kind of walk through why you all were right. And that's not to say that it's not a subjective thing. A lot of it is according to your taste, so I guess there's no right or wrong answers. But the predominant answer, I guess, was that these little sweet olives needed to be here. And here is the rationale, which is why I think they look better here than those topiaries in the back, and it's pretty much most of the reasons that you cited. Number one, Those, when I brought them here, they did several things that weren't optimal. They obscured the finials, even when I moved them out a little bit further and in a little bit further, and I didn't like that. They just never looked comfortable, and I didn't want the finials to be hidden. And by the way, here's a little aside. Both of these finials look like they match a little bit better now than they did in the previous video, so you might want to go back and look at them. The reason why, these were part of my QVC collection, and I had one that was actually in the collection, what ended up to be the final product. And then I had another one that was identical to it, only it had a different finish, and it was sent to me as a sample. When I wanted to get two to match exactly, I couldn't because they were already sold out. So see, it was a problem for me too. So what I did was I just gave these a finish, so now they more closely resemble one another and they match a little bit better. But I digress. So back to this whole situation right here. Another problem with those Silverado sages is that they are in a chalice form and the base was rather small, and so they always looked a little bit like they were going to topple over. Some of you commented on that. They just didn't have enough visual weight to carry this space. They were also almost identically the same height as these pickets on the fence, so you didn't have that beautiful contrast of one or the other. The other reason that I think I like them better back here is because not only did I dislike them here, I like them much better in the back as a taller punctuation point that kind of drew my eye through the gate and to the back. Now I'm going to step out of the way, and something else that I did was really, I kind of decluttered this space. I cut back a lot of the perennials that were surrounding the pots and the things that were here before. Some of you commented, well, why did you plant the perennials to begin with if you were going to cut them back, if you didn't like their lushness and their fullness? Well, for me, I did like them when they were fresh and beautiful, but when they were hot and tired and buggy, I didn't like them anymore, and what I wanted was definition, not their presence, their physical presence. So I cut all of those back and I really opened up this area. I've still got some more garlic chives in here that need to come out. I had a hanging basket someplace else that was starting to look a little bit too cluttered, and it was also getting too much sun. So I moved it back here, put it on a plant stand, and by the way, you guys, that's a wonderful tip. You can just take any kind of saucer bulb or saucer container and put it on a plant stand, and I think it looks really beautiful. I still have a little bit more cleaning out in here to do, a little bit more lemon balm, then I'll come in with fresh gravel. But overall, I think it looks so much cleaner and so much more beautiful. And I've got a couple, these are the QVC baskets that are in my line. Stuart, can we put a card above? A card, by the way, you guys, is a clickable link that appears at the top, and you can just click on it and it will take you there. So these are part of the Kobo basket line I've got on QVC. You might go there and check. I haven't checked in a while to know what the inventory is, but I've got 3 baskets over here that now all sing the same language. The pots of the sweet olive are inside this basket. I've got another one here on a plant stand, so I don't even have to bend over when I want to grab it for weeding. And then I've got a third one here, and that's where before I put up my tools, my pruners, my scissors, that kind of thing for the day, I can just plop them in there because I'm trying to be better about remembering where I put things. So I can kind of put them in there while I'm tending other things. Now, another reason, some of you said that you thought that these looked a little bit too rangy and a little bit too scraggly, and I agree completely. I had not done any pruning on them. I don't know that I'm ready to clip them into a tight ball shape. The reason being, I've already got this really tight form. Stuart, if you don't mind coming up and showing, you can see where I have started to prune and the other areas that I have not pruned. And so this is so tightly clipped that I kind of wanted something that was a little bit looser, and also that echoed in both color and form the olive tree that's in the center. So back to the sweet olives that are now flanking either side. I did cut them back a little bit so they're not quite so rangy, but I do like the effect of seeing this loose foliage against the tighter form of the boxwood, and you can see I've made pretty much headway on that. I took out anything that was in the first two quadrants because all I'm going to do is leave that fallow for a little while. I'll add some compost to it, but I'm going to leave that fallow for a while until I'm ready to plant some lettuce seeds, some kale, and things like that for some fall greens. Way too hot to do that right now. I also cut back some other things. I cut back the barberry a little bit. I took out some more daylilies. I will probably prune a little bit more on some of these understory plants. But the other thing I did, and if it was you that made this comment, please let me know. Somebody said maybe there's too many pairs of things because I had these pairs here and I had 2 pairs with the fig trees here, then I had pairs of things on the inside, and I so appreciate that comment because whoever gave it to me, you intuited what was wrong with this space, and I was trying to artificially impose real, very repetitive symmetry in an asymmetrical garden, because while this is symmetrical going into the potager, in general the rest of my garden has slow moving curves and is not a symmetrical space. So what I did was try to get a twofer, so I have 2 matching sweet olives on either side, which also, by the way, you guys can really handle. This is probably the most brutal exposure in my yard towards the end of the day. It gets both southern and western sun. These can really handle it. I left them in their lightweight pots because I kind of like the way they look sticking out of the baskets. And then both of these will go to the greenhouse this winter because they're not reliable winter hardy. So I've got that touch of symmetry, but a little bit of asymmetry with this wonderful, one of my favorite things of the growing season this year. And this is my potatim, or my pot of thyme. I really love that. And isn't this pot just gorgeous with its kind of mold and muck on it? Some of you asked me when I talked about aging pots if I ever did the treatment where you use yogurt or buttermilk or some kind of fermented product to encourage algae to grow on the outside. And I do, but it's very dry right now. It's very hot and dry, and so it's not going to grow very quickly. So sometimes I just want to cheat. Again, I'm not very patient and move the process along. So that's why I use the technique in aging the pots, and Stuart will put a card here. So coming in, I've got some other decisions to make, and since you guys intuitively just were spot on, I think, about why those sweet olives needed to be there, and I agreed with you once I tried things and moved them around. And by the way, you guys, sometimes you just don't know until you try something. And one of the funnest things about gardening, I think, is kind of trial and error and moving things just like you move the furniture in your home, moving things from one place to another. It makes it, keeps it from being boring, and you're refreshing with things you already have. Stuart, if you don't mind pointing into what I now am calling my Mediterranean corner that's in full sun. I've still got a little bit of clipping and pruning to do on my Mediterranean corner, but I cleaned that up a bit. And then you can also see what a difference it makes now that this is tightly clipped. So some other things I am pondering. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was also very I think really spot on. I've used that phrase too much, but just really pinpointed, I think, one of the reasons that I'm not as satisfied with this area, and it's the presence of this half wine barrel right here. Now, am I gonna move it right now that I have reinvigorated and replanted these beautiful Tithonia, which just keep getting more beautiful by the day? Look at all the buds on there. And I love when I am rounding the curve into the potager, I love seeing this little spot of orange poking through. It's that jolt of vibrant color in an area that is mostly evergreen. So I really like that. Another couple of things that I am going to do, and then I'm going to ask you guys for your opinion again. So I used these Titan poles, Titan two-tour supports from Gardener's Supply, these black ones, to kind of get these guys growing up straight. One of them hasn't reached the apex of the point, but this one has. So I think what I'm going to do is remove these. Now that I've got pretty good form, I'm going to remove these and I'm going to put them over here on either side to support this Rudbeckia lacinata so it doesn't come crashing down on the rest of the things in here. Here's something else I'm going to do. You may recall in previous episodes that last summer I had a beautiful, fabulous border of Chef's Choice rosemary, like this here from the Southern Living Plant Collection. I had 3 huge mounds of it in the front of this border. It did brilliantly. It made it through 2 winters. Sadly, it succumbed to the Arctic blast and was one of the biggest disappointments for me of things that I lost. So my first response, my first reaction was, I loved it so much, do it again, and that Arctic blast was hopefully not something we'll see again anytime soon. But in case it is, it was just too heartbreaking. So I'm not going to do that again. I'll keep my Chef's Choice rosemary in pots so I can bring it in. But I'm going to plant another tougher plant, more tough plant in the front in what few gaps I have, even replacing some of the Sedum Autumn Joy that I've got here, which is pretty tough. But this is just horrific exposure when the temperatures get up in the high 90s, and some of this starts to kind of burn out and suffer. So I think some of this I'm going to take out, and at equal intervals along the length of this space. Stuart, if you don't mind maybe slowly torquing in the other direction so people can see what it looks like along the length. So in these voids that are here, because I do like the front of this border to be pretty full and pretty lush, I think what I'm going to do is this year I will ultimately buy some mums for fall, and then when I'm finished using them in a staging area in the front, I will plant them back in here in the foreground, because as we all know, mums are as tough as nails, and it's a way I can reuse something that otherwise I might just compost. I'm going to plant a little bit more of this Rudbeckia in here, and then it will be held up with these Titan poles. So that is something else that I'm going to do back in here. I got such a late start on really choreographing and styling all of that this year that it feels so good to finally be able to do that. And then the other thing I'm going to do, obviously, is clip my boxwood. This is how I get the rounded edge, you guys. And some of you will say, well, is this the time of year to do it? Either because it's too hot or because it's too close to fall and it won't be hardened off. Well, I have found that right now is for me about the best time to do the last major prune of the boxwood hedge, because our average first frost date, and by the way, in my last video I said, don't just, or I said average first frost, don't just know your last frost date, but know your average first frost date. And that will tell you how much time you have between now and first frost for things to harden off. And for me, I will have more than enough time for any new growth to harden off. So depending on where you live, you can research it, ask your local extension center, or just Google it. I've got my beloved Barnell pruners here. And this is why I like them so much. See how they can get in there with their pointy tip? They can get in there, and I can be very exacting on my pruning. And then all of this tightly clipped boxwood, this is wintergreen boxwood, by the way, all of this tightly clipped boxwood will just be the perfect foil, both architecturally and from a color palette, and contrasting with the things that are more blousy. So by the time I get all of this clipped, I move. I've got a few more pots over there and things that need to be cleaned up so it doesn't look so cluttered. Let me show you a couple of other things that I'm going to be doing. This time of year, in spring, I want more. This time of year, if you're like me, and tell me if you are, I want less of all of those smaller container plantings, with the exception of a lot of my topiaries. So what I'm doing with some of my geraniums, some of my other potted plants that are in smaller pots, I am now aggregating them into fewer, bigger pots. So I'm putting them all together into a bigger pot. That way they will make more of a statement, and I don't have a lot of small pots kind of cluttering up the garden itself and the landscape from a style perspective. So another thing that I'm gonna do, Stuart, if you don't mind backing up, this is a corner that still needs some work, but you can see that I've got a large, what looks like a brown Italian terracotta pot. Look at this, look at that bumblebee. Its color just perfectly matches the color of the petals. And by the way, you guys, one of the things that I love most about Stuart, one of his best qualities, I think, since he's not a gardener, he has just the wonderful, almost a childlike delight in things that he experiences in the garden. It's very, very charming, and it's very endearing, Stuart. I just gave him a back pat. But back to this pot. So these are fiberglass pots. I've got 2 of them, and I'm going to plant them this fall with masses and masses of tulips that I then will stage somewhere here in the potager, probably in the border, because in the border in spring there's not a whole lot going on in here, and so I can have 2 pots strategically placed with lots and lots of tulip bulbs in it. Now, I'm not going to tell you my procedure for planting bulbs in pots right now. I'll save that for another video. But that's an idea that I have in mind. And likewise, next summer versus planting it in the ground, I'm thinking about just tons and tons of that blue plumbago that we saw at the last garden tour that we were on. I think it will be absolutely wonderful. That was John Turman's garden. And so I think that light blue plumbago, you can tell I'm having stream of consciousness thoughts. That light blue plumbago will be beautiful in here, and probably will do a little bit, things always do better for me generally in pots than they do in the ground with my heavy clay soil. So that is kind of what's going on in this area, why you guys were so right. Another thing that I perhaps did not mention is that the tall, slim trunk on those Silverata sages, which did get a good prune, they looked too wimpy and too see-through and they didn't have enough visual weight in front of these tall vertical pickets. I think in front of the verticality of the pickets, I needed something that was a little bit more squatty. Again, you guys just intuited that stuff, and then you just so brilliantly gave me the reasons for why you intuited it. And that is invaluable. So when you're helping someone else in their gardens, look at it through the same lens that you looked at this point of entry, because I think it makes so much difference. Now here is my one last request. Ignore all of this over here that has yet to be tended. But here is my one last request, because you guys know that I took off the end boxwood balls. Look here, guys. I'm already starting to get growth here. And I bet next spring, and it's also growing in. So I bet next spring this is completely closed off on both sides. So I made this area much more open for navigation and for work. It also exposes the brickwork more, which I think, brick and stone, which I think is really lovely. I'll put down a little bit more pea gravel. But here's what I'm contemplating, and I'm going to sketch this out and see if I like it. So this section here is growing. There used to be a void between this section here. Stuart, if you can show, you can see I'm still clipping. But there used to be a rather wide space between this section of this stylized heart and the circle in the middle. It's gotten so, let me go over here.
I said like over there.
Yeah, like over here. There was more space. You can see it's starting to close off. I haven't pruned that section yet. So my options were, I could just let it all grow together. But that would make it a little bit difficult to prune, and I think would just be too much boxwood. So here's what I'm thinking, and I haven't decided. I want some of your good design skill input, so please let me know. I don't know if I'll do it this fall or I'll wait until spring. I definitely don't want to lose the focal point circle in the middle, but I'm thinking about taking off these sections and then having this culminate in maybe boxwood balls, 4 boxwood balls on the inside that I could start shaping. That would then give much more definition to the shape of this circle in the middle. And I talk a lot, here's my sales pitch. In my book, The Elegant and Edible Garden, Stuart, can we put a card up there? If you haven't already ordered it, it's available on Amazon, or available for pre-order on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all sorts of different locations. And I talk about all of the different options I had to be flexible in this garden design. So I want your input. Should I remove these and make some boxwood balls on the ends? Should I leave them and let it all grow together? Should I remove them and not have any boxwood balls on the end? Should I just remove maybe these sections, which are slowly starting to grow together? Should I just remove these and leave this intact? Tell me, get out your sketchbook yourself and tell me what design you find most pleasing. Now this is something I really can't do by trial and error, because once it's out, but I can sketch it out and see what kind of design might look best to me. So there is a hodgepodge of things for you guys to ponder this Sunday. I really appreciate you hanging out with me. We had talked about doing a YouTube live today, but at 11 it will still just be too hot, and I really want to be able to walk around in the garden during the YouTube live. So Stuart and I just made the decision to postpone that for when it's a little bit cooler, maybe on a cloudy day. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate, there's a helicopter overhead, how much I appreciate your input and how I really took it to heart. So links to everything I talked about are listed below, including the wonderful giraffe hose reel. Love it, love it, love it. You guys have a great Sunday, and I hope you have time to get out in your gardens too. Well, here's my fashion epilogue du jour in case you guys have hung in there for this portion. If not, just go on to the next video. So today, my sunglasses, I believe I got years ago at Forever 21. They've got kind of a John Lennon vibe. My t-shirt, one of my favorite things to recommend from Amazon, and I'll put the link below. It's part of their Amazon Essentials. I just get a bunch of their white V-neck t-shirts. That way I always have one that's crisp and clean. My belt, I can't remember, maybe Nordstrom Rack. Okay, you guys, love these. If you can still find them online, you definitely want to get them. These are from Target. It's part of their Any Day collection. They're loose and linen-y. I love, love, love this look in the summertime, and they will segue great into fall. I also like them because they're loose and very, very cool, and most importantly, they have pockets. I got them in both of this kind of black and white or gray and white, and also the buff color. They have a very Katharine Hepburn, Grace Kelly vibe to them, so I really like them. My sandals I got from Target years ago. No judgment on my pedicure. I'm going to get one next week. I've been tending to hubs, and that's been my priority for a while. So let me see, my earrings. I can't remember where I got these earrings. I think I got them at some kind of secondhand store or a thrift store. My ensemble of bracelets, I got this wonderful black leather one from a store that used to be on Western Avenue right around the corner from my house called the French Cowgirl. I made this one with a friend of mine, Jenny, who's the bead buyer from Hobby Lobby. I got this one, boy, this is a trip down memory lane. This gold one I got about 40 years ago when I worked in a gift shop in Edmond called Nomi's Ark, and this I got at an art fair, I believe, and I like just the assemblage of bracelets. And I find it easier to work in bracelets than I do in rings, which is why you'll seldom ever see me working in the garden with rings on. So that is my fashion ensemble du jour, and I'll set it off with a beautiful Tithonia bloom. Yes, these guys did live in this barrel. And also my coffee mug, which was compliments of my local Goodwill.